Welcome to Spiritual Cartel Step Reading. Tonight we're looking at steps 6 and 7, and this week I'm pleased to introduce Sheldon F, who's kindly agreed to come and share for us. Sheldon, over to you.
Hey everybody, Sheldon Fetty, alcoholic and definitely a cocaine addict. It's a pleasure to come and hang out with you guys. This evening there, it is noon here. I'm in Las Vegas, Nevada. My sobriety date or my clean date is July 17th of 1996. I have a home group. It's the Common Solution Group here in Las Vegas. And if you're ever in Vegas, please look us up. My phone number is by my name. It's not there as a complaints hotline. So if you don't like what I have to share, that's between you and your sponsor. But if you do want to reach out to me for any reason whatsoever, I'm on WhatsApp, and I love meeting and talking to new alcoholics and addicts. So we're just going to have to believe that I drank too much and I did too much blow. I'm a pig. I'm not a specialist. I had my first drink when I was 9. I was full-blown addict by the time I was 13. By the time I was 16, I was a disaster. 25, I started trying to get clean, and 28 is when I finally was able to get sober. If my voice sounds confusing, it's because I was born in England, and I lived there till I was 16. I'm not an American military brat. I'm a Yorkshireman, but I've been here too long, so I lost my accent. But then hearing you guys when you're talking, it kind of brings it back out a little bit on certain words. So I'm not trying to do my best impersonation of a fake English accent. I'm actually doing my best impersonation of a fake American accent. So hopefully that'll explain to you a little bit about maybe the way I sound. Step 6 and 7 are boy, when I first got sober and I first went through the steps, I was excited about 6 and 7, but not for the reason maybe that you might think. I thought they were freebies. I honestly thought that step 6 and 7 were kind of like, I don't know, we had a 10-step program, but 12 sounded more spiritual. It was the same number as the disciples, so Bill kind of slid them in there to pad the whole thing out a little bit. You know, I showed up at my sponsor's house having written my 4-step, and I'd been through a lot. By the time I got there, I'd been going in and out of AA for 3.5 years, unable to stay sober more than a week or so, burning my life to the ground over and over again. I finally, in July 17th of 96, was able to stay sober for a short amount of time. And he had me do all kinds of conversations, and there was no writing with my sponsor for steps 1, 2, and 3. Maybe your sponsor has you do writing. It doesn't matter. But there was a lot of conversation, soul searching. That 3.5 years of going in and out was really a step 1 experience. I started to write my 4-step, and there's a lot of anger, a lot of tears. I was very emotional. I remember at one point in the middle of writing my 4-step, throwing the pencil across the room and just, screw this and it was an emotionally exhausting experience. And I show up at my sponsor's house. Actually, we were at a hotel. He was speaking at a conference, and I went with him to the conference. And I show up at the hotel to spend the day doing my inventory. And I'm on step 4, and we begin the process, and we do step 5. And then he asked me, "Are you now willing to have God remove all these defects of character?" And it seemed like a dumb question almost. Like, I've done all this work of writing out this inventory, and I've shared this thing with him, and I'm not sure I really believe him that really all of my problems are caused by selfishness and self-centeredness and dishonesty and fear and inconsideration. I'm not really convinced that that's the cause of my problems. But if that is the cause of my problems, am I willing that God should take them away? Of course. I mean, I'd be an idiot, wouldn't I? So the answer is yes. Step 6, done. Step 7, humbly ask him, say the prayer. Okay, I'll say the prayer. 7, done. 6 and 7, done. We start to write an 8-step list. I showed up on step 4. I left on step 8. Now we're making progress. We got 4 steps out of the way in one day. I'm excited. 6 and 7 are done. They're like the flyover steps. You know, in America, we've got all those states in the middle of the country between LA and New York where nothing much happens, right? We call them the flyover states, when you're going from one cool part of the country to another cool part of the country. I probably insulted some people when I said that, right? But it felt like those steps were the flyover steps. I'm done. Start working on my 8-step list, looking at the ones, the low-hanging fruit, so I can start working on 9. Shoot, I woke up on step 4, went to bed on step 9. This is amazing. I'm going to fast forward about a year or two. I did my inventory very early in my sobriety. I happen to know that I was 29 days sober when I finished my 4-step, and I only know that because I was at this conference, and they did the countdown, and I was mad because I didn't get extra credit, and I had to be still under 30 days. I thought I should get a couple of days extra credit because I'd done my inventory, and I was mad because I had to identify as having less than 30 days in the sobriety countdown. So I'm relatively new in my sobriety, and I don't know if it's just me, but many of the times when I went in and out of Alcoholics Anonymous, early sobriety was incredibly painful. Being newly sober sucked, but for some reason this time, when I began my most recent 28-year stretch, early sobriety wasn't as painful as previous sobrieties had been. And I think that's because I was just exhausted from the in and out upheaval that I'd been causing in my life. And you know, you get a few good nights sleep, and you get to be able to eat a few hot meals, and you get to get a job, and you start to make a little money, and dad and mom start answering the phone, and those gifts of early sobriety outweighed the restless, irritable, and discontentedness that had driven me back out previous times. I get very active in my home group and very active in trying to sponsor people. And I'm not very active in 10 and 11. I don't really understand that process. But I'm trying to live this sober life. And 2 things happened. One thing happened at about 1 year sober. I used to go to this meeting at a place called the Samaritan House, and a friend of mine, Doug, is on the meeting, and I know Doug's very familiar with the Samaritan House. It's a men's sober living, low bottom, not county funded, but a low bottom place where guys getting out of jail or coming off the streets go to get sober. And I'm at that meeting, and my sponsor's there, and he comes up to me, and I said, I got to talk to you. He said, what's wrong? I said, I don't think AA or 12-step program works for me. He said, why? And what had happened is that newness and that novelty and that excitement of being sober had started to wear off. And I'm looking at my life, and I said, I think I'm getting worse. I'm not getting better. I'm getting worse. He said, what do you mean? I said, well, I keep coming to you with the same crap. I'm mad at my boss, and we talk about my boss, and you point out that I'm the guy that's wrong one more time, and I did it again. You know, I got emotional over stuff I shouldn't get emotional about. I took things personally at work I shouldn't take personally. I got irritated at things I shouldn't get irritated at. In my relationship, I was in a new relationship for a woman I ended up marrying, and she would make me crazy. She'd say things and do things, and I'd get irritated and upset. Other times I would go home, and this is a little embarrassing. I would go home, and I would be so afraid that she had changed her mind about the relationship that if she wasn't home, occasionally I would go in the closet and just make sure her clothes were there. Because I could imagine her leaving me. I couldn't imagine her leaving her shoes. So I would go in the closet and make sure his stuff was there so I could breathe a little, right? But I'm wrapped in fear and I'm wrapped in judgment and I'm getting resentments and I just feel like everything we talked about in my inventory is driving me almost more than it did. You know, it had to be pointed out to me in early sobriety. It had to be shown to me by writing an inventory. Now I'm living in the middle of my life without a drink or a drug in me, and I got to tell you, I think I'm getting worse. And he laughed at me, and he said, "You know," he said, "You're far from perfect. None of us are perfect." And he quoted that line in the book that's been quoted at me many times. No one among us has been able to maintain anything like perfect adherence to these principles. No one among us. That's not you, not me, not your sponsor, not your favorite circuit speaker, not Bill Wilson or Dr. Bob. No one among us has been able to maintain, constantly do anything like not even close. Like if you were to watch him, you'd be like, hey, that's not anything like perfect adherence to these principles. We're not saints, right? I make mistakes. I do things wrong and all the rest. I said, you're not perfect. You'll never be perfect. And you've got a long way to grow. You're only about a year sober, Sheldon. And hopefully, as you stay sober and active in Alcoholics Anonymous, hopefully you will grow and change and get better. You know, as a side note, one of the things that irritates me in meetings, which just goes to show I'm still getting irritated in meetings at 28 years active. But one of the things that irritates me in meetings is when somebody says, well, what do you expect of me? I'm just an alcoholic. Or what do you expect of me? I'm just an addict. Or what do you expect of me? Well, what I expect of you is that you will be better today than you were yesterday. And the reason I expect that is because Alcoholics Anonymous and Cocaine Anonymous works. If you're new and someone has told you that you're sick and you're always going to be sick, I want to tell you, stay away from those people, because this program works. It improves you, changes you, makes you better. You become a more complete human, easier to fit into society. Although you will still make mistakes, life and you and everything gets better. If it didn't, I would say don't stay. Go find a program where the people in the rooms are telling you this program works and you can get well. And that's what I will tell you, is that this program works and you can get well. So he was telling me that I would get better over time. But he said, what's happening, Sheldon, is that when you were new and before you came in, before you showed up in the program, you would behave in ways that were driven by your character defects. You'd behave in ways you'd react. Your reaction to life would be askew. It would be the wrong reaction. You'd make these mistakes, but you didn't notice because you didn't care. You didn't feel the emotions you're feeling now because you weren't paying attention. Now what we've done is we've given you a criteria or a framework in which to live your life, and you have something to look at your behavior in relation to. And now you're noticing how screwed up you are, which is the first step of any kind of improvement of anything. If you don't know what the problem is, that's why we spend so much time in the big book. Steps 1 and 2 take you all the way from the prefaces and the forwards and the doc's opinion, and then 60 pages of the big book. It's a third of the 2/3 almost in the big book on 1 and 2, because we have to identify the problem before we can apply a solution. And what you're feeling, this fear that you're getting worse, is in fact driven by the fact that you're not getting worse, you're actually getting slowly better. But you're noticing things about yourself you hadn't noticed before. And that gave me some relief. Fast forward a couple more years. Things are not going well at work. I mean, I'm getting promoted. I'm making more money. I haven't quit my job in a while. I'm at the same job for a little while. But I don't feel like I fit and like I belong at work. I'm constantly afraid they're going to fire me. I mean, I'm not doing anything wrong. I just feel like I know that I don't really measure up, and I know that I feel like a fraud is what I feel like. I feel like every time they give me a new assignment or promotion or a little more money, I feel like a fraud. I feel like, and I'm getting upset about things that I shouldn't get upset about. It took me a while to learn that work sucks, and it sucks because they pay you to go there. If it didn't suck, they wouldn't pay you. It's funny, everything in my life that I've ever done that is enjoyable, I've had to pay for a ticket to go. They pay you to go to work because it sucks. I didn't realize that, so I would get resentful anytime it was uncomfortable or miserable at work. I'd get angry, like, how dare they treat me like this? These people are out of line. Don't they know who I think I am, for God's sakes? And I would get, right, so I'm afraid they're going to fire me, and I resent them because they don't treat me well, and it makes very difficult place to be. And I get the similar emotions in my relationship with a woman who has now become my wife. I'm not respected enough. I'm not treated well enough. The newness of the relationship has started to go away, and I don't think that I'm loved properly by a woman who I'm terrified is going to cheat on me and leave. Again, a very difficult way to have a relationship. My home group, right? My home group, they have these business meetings where they plot the demise of the group. And I know that if they vote against the way I want them to vote, I know what's going to happen. The group's going to crumble and people are going to die. And we're killing people with the way we run our business meetings. And if they would just understand how smart right? And at the same time, I feel like they don't love me because they don't call on me often enough. And someone went to coffee with someone else and they didn't send me when they say at the end of the meeting, if anybody would like to go to coffee, we're meeting over here. I don't think they included me in that because I'm not part of everyone. I'm like, I need a personal invitation is what I need the announcement at the end of the meeting to be. If anybody would like to come to coffee after the meeting, yes, Sheldon, we mean you too. We'd really like you to come. Then meet us over here. That's the way I want that announcement to be at the end of the meeting. So I think they're idiots. They're doing it wrong, but I'm afraid they don't like me. And again, all of this emotional stuff and everywhere in my life, every relationship, I'm butting up against this. So I go to my sponsor's house. Because they told me when I was new, they said, if you have a good idea, what I've decided to do is quit everything. I'm going to quit AA, quit my job. I'm going to put a few things in the back of my car and move to a small town 300-400 miles away and start all over again, right? And it's a great idea. And they told me when I was new, if you have a good idea, call your sponsor. If you have a great idea, go and see him, right? So I go to see my sponsor and I knock on the door. And I must have had an expression on my face that really, like I wasn't hiding. The mask must have been off. I must have had that look of panic and disgust and fear and anger. It must have been all over my face because he opened the door and he did not greet me in his normal way. Hey, man, good to see you. Love you. Give me a... He didn't do any of that. He looked at me and he went, oh, my God, I know that look. That's the Sheldon can't manage his own life look. You better come inside. And we went inside and we sat on the couch and we talked for half an hour and I cried and I was very emotional and he was a smart man. He didn't interrupt me or stop me. It was almost like he knew I had to burn out all the fuel, right? And he just let me burn. And I got done and I looked at him and I'm like, what do I do? And he said to me, I think you're having a step 6 and 7 problem. And I was like, what are you talking about? I've done step 6 and 7. That can't be it. And he laughed at me. And he said, look, Sheldon, he said, I don't know what you think 6 and 7 are. He said, but the measure of my physical sobriety, whether or not I am drunk today, that is measured by my participation in practice of step 1. But whether or not I am at peace today, the measure of my serenity is the measure of how willing I am to do step 6 and then subsequently 7. I had missed the whole point of step 6 and 7. This is what I have come to believe and to feel and to think. First of all, I think one of my unreasonable demands on 6 and 7, or on God, if you like, is that I'm a good AA member and I'm sponsoring guys and I'm active in my home group and I have a commitment and I'm paying my amends and I'm calling my sponsor, I'm sponsoring guys. I'm doing what I consider, if I was to whip out my AA resume and check all the boxes, my AA resume is pretty good. And God is God. And God could remove from me all of my fear, anxiety, resentment, judgment. He could remove from me selfishness, self-centeredness, inconsideration, dishonesty, and fear. He has the power because he's God. And if you want to know the truth, I'm a little mad he hasn't. You would think that an active member of AA that is participating at the level I'm participating at, by now God would have anointed me and made me pure. He could, and I'm a little mad that he hasn't. In fact, when I die, I want to have a meeting. I just need 5 minutes of the big guy's time. Listen, Pops, love the deal, great journey, but you could have let me suffer less. Why didn't you? And I think if I just take an initial cursory look at 6 and 7 and I glance at them as if they are menu items on the buffet of Alcoholics Anonymous, where we take what we like and leave the rest behind, which, by the way, we don't do that, because that would be half measures and that avails us nothing. So again, if you're new, ignore the people that say that. They don't know what they're talking about. We do everything here. We get all the way in, we sit all the way down. And if we're lucky enough to catch fire in the program, then we get to have amazing and wonderful lives. But I'm looking at this menu item. I'm looking at 6 and 7. Yeah, I'll take one of each of those, please. And expecting to be driven into perfection and wonderfulness. And I want to have a meeting with God, and I want to lodge my complaint that I wasn't driven wonderful and pure. Why, if God is a loving God? And I just want to caution you, when I mention God, I probably don't mean who you think I mean. Born into a Jewish home, Judaism did nothing for me. I 13 years old, I took my cash and prizes and left the tribe. But I did learn that I could never be a Christian. They did teach me that, so I'm not a Christian. I'm not a monotheist. I don't know how to describe the way I believe and relate to God. I guess I'm a quasi-pagan, somewhat Buddhist, atheist Jew that's fascinated by quantum physics. Hope string theory is the real deal. Not really sure if we're in a simulation, confused by all of it. And when I say God, that's what I mean. Just God's shorter and quicker and easier for me to say, right? So if God's really kind and loving and benevolent and all of the things he teaches that he is, and he could remove all of that from me, why hasn't he? But if I really think about what would happen if he did, if God removed from me all of the struggle and all of the turmoil, what would be the first thing that I would do? Or I should say the first thing that I would not do. I would stop praying. You know, when good things happen in my life, if I think you're watching, I'll give God credit. I mean, secretly, I think it's all my doing. But if I think you're watching, I'll say, oh, yeah, by the grace of a loving God, I'm so grateful for the new car. It's beautiful. I'm thinking to myself, yeah, God didn't show up to work those 60 hours last week, did he? But yes, I'm grateful to God for all he's done. What drives me to God is the problems and the struggles in my life. What allows me to connect with that higher power is the gifts of the struggles and the difficulties. And I've had them. Look, my ex-wife and I, well, she's my ex-wife. That's a bad day. There's one of the bad days, right? We have one son. He's amazing. We saw 4 heartbeats. 3 of them didn't make it. Those are 3 really bad days when you go to the doctor and the doctor says, I'm so sorry. We're going to have to surgically remove the fetus because the baby didn't make it. I've had bad days. My dad died. That was a pretty tough day. I had a stroke, which caused a seizure, which broke my back. And I was in bed for 9 months. waiting for them to come up with a way to fix me. That's a series of bad days. I've had business problems. I mean, listen, I've had a lot more good days than bad days. Don't get me wrong. I'm sober 28 years. It's over 10,000 some hundred days. And I probably had, 100 bad days. I mean, overall, it's been a pretty good run. 90% or more, 95% of the days have been pretty damn good. But I've had some tough days, right? And it is the difficulties and the struggles, not those horrible things that happen, but the resentment against my boss that I have to work through and learn more about myself, and the difficulty there, and all of these things that drive me to God. Maybe God gives me the struggles and the difficulties as a gift. Maybe not. I don't know. That's not written in our program anyway. That's a Sheldon sees it. So take it or leave it. I don't care. But let's get back to what the book says and our literature, and what can I glean from that I can share with you, which again, I caution you, is as Sheldon sees it. One of the things I'm often asked to share at conferences and at meetings like this, and I want you to know that the gift that I have is a gift of communication. It is not a gift of knowledge or insight or spiritual prowess. I happen to be a good communicator. So when I tell you the things that I think, I've been wrong more in my life than I've been right. In fact, I have heard tapes of myself from a few years before and thought, I don't agree with any of what that idiot's saying. So I change my mind regularly. So just because I say it doesn't mean it's true, but this is my current view, the way I currently see things. Everything that I will ever do in Alcoholics Anonymous, if I wanted to make it into its most simple form, it would be that I turn my will and my life over to the care of God. That everything that happens in this world, I accept readily and happily as the way God wants it to be. And that the only evidence I have of that is that, well, that's the way it is. And if it's God's world and He made it that way, then there's a reason for it. And it's above my pay grade. That if I could do that, if I could accept the world and live in the moment right now, the way things are, not worry about the past, not be afraid of the future, but if I could live in this moment right now, accepting God's universe as the way it is, everything would be fine if I could do that. Now, you may think that that's step 3. Why am I talking about that when I'm supposed to be talking about 6 and 7? Because I don't think that is step 3. If it was step 3, if you could do that in step 3, why would you do 4? 4 sucks. 5's embarrassing. 6 and 7, nobody understands. 8 and 9 are incredibly expensive. 10 and 11 are so confusing. Half the people think they're doing 10 when they're really doing 11. And step 12, there's too much good stuff on Netflix. I don't have time for that. So if I could really turn my will and my life over to the care of God in step 3, I'd have a 3-step program. I'm a bum. God exists. Turn my life over to God. Let's move on. And I tried that program, and I drank again and again and again. A good friend of mine says, and I love this, he says about step 3, he said that it relates to in the morning when he wakes up, he makes a decision, because that's what step 3 says, made a decision. He makes a decision to go to work. And it's a real decision. Nothing will change his mind. He has done step 3 as far as going to work is concerned. He's made a decision to turn his will and his life over to the activity of going to work. He's going. It's a decision. And he's still in bed. There's a lot to do before he arrives at work beyond the decision. He's still got to get up and brush his teeth, take a shower, put his clothes on, kind of like doing his inventory. Got to get in his car. Got to start the car and begin the drive, kind of like doing step 5. Got to navigate the road, 6 and 7. Got to get in the parking lot, park the car, step 8. Got to go inside the building, step 9. Got to get to his desk, put his keys down, steps 10 and 11. Sit at his desk, and then he'll have a spiritual awakening as a result of those steps, and he'll be behind his desk, ready to work. But step 3, making a decision to go to work, doesn't get him to work. And I believe step 3 doesn't get me to God. I believe that. And I believe our big book says that an effect, although a very great one, can have no lasting or permanent effect. And I will tell you this if you knew. I know we do this one day at a time, but I'm not looking to get the rest of today's sobriety. I'm looking for a permanent solution. And that's what the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous or the literature that you read in CA offers is a permanent solution. I'll do it one day at a time. I never thought I could get high on yesterday's cocaine or drunk on tomorrow's whiskey. I got to drink today if I'm going to get high today. Of course. But I'm looking for a permanent solution, and you could have a little permanent effect if you take a third step, and that's where you stop. Next, we launch, right? We got to get some going. So what's going on with me? And this is what I think is going on with me. I think that I come out of 6 and 7, the first foray, where I go, yeah, sure, God, you could take it all, and I go about my life and pain step 9, and if I'm lucky, frustration of living life on the natch and in 2025 and being a Sheldon in Las Vegas. Sometimes it can be frustrating being a Sheldon in Las Vegas. It's just the nature of the beast. I'm sure it can be frustrating being a you in whatever town you're in too. It's just sometimes frustrating. Hopefully the frustration doesn't drive me back to drink, but drives me into more inventory. Whether it's the 10-step inventory that we do throughout the day or the 11-step inventory that we do at night, but I'm driven into more inventory. And as I'm driven into more inventory, I get the realization that I'm doing it again. I am again living based on selfishness and self-centeredness. I'm again the actor that wants to run the whole show. I'm again trying to wrest satisfaction and happiness out of this world if I only manage well. I'm again living in selfishness, self-centeredness, dishonesty, fear, inconsideration. I'm driven by 100 forms of fear. And in that inventory, with that information, looking at those character defects, I get to do step 6, which says, am I willing to really do step 3? Am I really willing right here, right now, at this moment, with this upset, this anxiety, this tension, these problems, do I demand the results that I believe I deserve? The apologies, the recognition, the extra money, the free time, the goods, the gifts, the cash and prizes. Or am I willing to do step 3? Am I willing to have God remove from me what is really the problem, which is the selfishness, self-centeredness, dishonesty, fear, and inconsideration? Am I willing in this moment? It is a decision point that happens constantly, armed with the information that I glean from the inventory in 10 and 11. Not armed with, well, I think that whatever God wants, but with real information, actionable information. I am currently afraid. I'm currently resentful. I'm currently self-centered. I'm currently being dishonest. Armed with that information, am I willing to give that to God? And if I am, in 7, I give it to him. 6 and 7 are the action steps of step 3. I don't know if they make this joke where you're from, but when I was new, they would say, step 3, the old timer says there are 3 frogs on a log. One of them decides to jump off. How many frogs are on the log? And the new guy goes, 2. And the sponsor goes, no, Sparky, there's still 3 frogs on the log. It was only a decision. Well, if the frog ever took step 6 and 7, you'd hear a splash. That's the action. So I'm in a meeting, and we're talking about 6 and 7, and somebody says, this same thing has happened many times. Wilson didn't mean much about 6 and 7, for crying out loud. They're not that important. 1 paragraph on 6. 7's just a prayer. There's not much written there about it. They're not that important. If 6 and 7 were that important, why didn't Bill write more about them? I'm making this up, but the way I see it, I think Bill didn't write much on 6 and 7 because there wasn't much else to say. He'd written an entire book about 6 and 7. The whole book is about the 6 and 7 experience. Step 1, I'm powerless over alcohol. My life is unmanageable. I need a solution. There is a problem to which I need a solution. That solution in step 2 is that I look for God. In other words, I look for my ability to turn my will in my life, or to turn my reactions, or to allow God to remove from me the things that are, in other words, in step 2, I say that I'm willing to look for a step 6 and 7 experience. In step 3, I make a decision to have a 6 and 7 experience. Step 4, I write about my life and what it looks like when I don't have a 6 and 7 experience. Step 5, I share about what it's like when I don't have a 6 and 7 experience. 6 and 7. Step 8, I write a list of all the person I harmed, not living in 6 and 7. Step 9, I try to make amends to such people wherever possible for the way I treated them when I was not living in 6 and 7. Steps 10 and 11, I check to make sure I'm still trying to live in 6 and 7. And step 12, I try to help a new man have evidence of 6 and 7 of his own so I can witness the miracle in front of my very eyes and have a front row seat to the greatest show on earth, watching the lights come on as somebody has their first 6 and 7 experience. I think 6 and 7 are all we do. I think it is everything in the program. I think that it is the beginning and the end, the Alpha and the Omega, and I think everything that we do is about supporting this. Am I today in a position in my life where I'm willing to see that the only difficulty and struggle I could possibly have, as it says in step 10 in the 12 and 12, where it says that anytime I am disturbed, it's a spiritual axiom. Anytime we're disturbed, there's something wrong with us. Am I willing to accept that my problem is not life, but my problem is reaction to life? That my reaction to life is drift and selfishness, self-centered, dishonesty, fear, and inconsideration. And am I willing at this moment to turn those things over to God and humbly ask him to remove them so I can sit in the world at peace? And I will tell you, at 28 years sober, sometimes that question needs to be asked, and I don't ask it. I don't ask it because anger feels good. I don't ask it because when I am angry, I feel superior to you, and the adrenaline rush kicks in, and it makes me feel good, and I don't ask it. The longer I'm sober, hopefully, the quicker I am willing to ask that question. Sometimes fear seems like the right answer. The longer I'm sober, hopefully, the quicker I'll be willing to ask that question. But I'll go a step further. Sometimes I ask that question, and the answer is no. Sometimes I will be faced with that question, and I will be well aware of what the right action is, and I will say no, and I will pay the price when the answer is no. And the price is always the same. It's always emotional pain and then embarrassing amends. And sometimes I will pay the price knowingly. Sometimes I will pay the price unknowingly. But as the 12 and 12 says, that anyone that can practice this step every day has the right to call himself a man spiritually. That it is all we do. It is advanced AA, I suppose, if there is such a thing. I don't think there is, but if there is such a thing, it certainly is the thing that marks my, not physical sobriety, but if you want to, emotional sobriety has become the catchphrase of the day. If you want emotional sobriety, it lives in 6 and 7. Spiritual growth, live in 6 and 7. Peace and contentment, live in 6 and 7. My prayer for the rest of the day is that I don't forget that, and that I try my best to live in step 6 and 7. And I wish you the same. Thank you for inviting me. Thank you for letting me share.